This year's Us Against Alzheimer's National Summit is on October 16th to 17th. This virtual gathering brings together international leaders to explore solutions to the most pressing challenges facing brain health. This year's theme, the new era of Alzheimer's. What does it mean for all of us? Don't miss our keynote speaker, Dr. Dean Ornish, founder and president of the Preventive Medicine Research Institute. For more information about the Us Against Alzheimer's annual summit, go to usa2summit.org.
Welcome to BrainStorm by Us Against Alzheimer's, a patient-centered nonprofit organization. Your host, Meryl Comer, is a co-founder, 24-year caregiver, an Emmy Award-winning journalist, and the author of the New York Times bestseller, Slow Dancing with a Stranger.
This is BrainStorm, and I'm Meryl Comer. Our topic, smart planning for healthy longevity and the bankrupting cost of dementia. Our guest is leading investment advisor Ric Edelman. He is the #1 ranked New York Times bestselling author on personal finance 12 times over, and his podcast, The Truth About Your Future, ranks in the top 1% nationally. Ric, thank you for joining us.
I'm thrilled to be with you, Meryl. Thank you.
Ric, from your years of investment experience, what are the most common financial mistakes that smart people, either trying to build their financial worth or protect their retirement, continue to make?
I'd say that they fall into two categories, and they seem to be contradictory to each other, which is all the more interesting. The first mistake people make is figuring, I've got plenty of time, I'll worry about this later. I'll be making more money in the future. I'll have fewer obligations in the future. Right now, my current expenses are high. I'm not making as much as I will later. So they procrastinate and they figure they got plenty of time to worry about it later. The problem there, of course, is that they're squandering the most valuable resource we all have, which is time and the power of compounding. So people in their 20s, 30s, 40s say they'll worry about it in their 50s, 60s, 70s. And by the time they get into their 50s, 60s, 70s, they wish they'd started 30 years ago. So that's the first mistake, is procrastination. The other mistake, which seems to be contradictory to what I just said, when people put things off and they delay because they figure they got plenty of time, on the flip side of that, people dramatically underestimate how much time they actually have. If you ask them, how long are you going to live? People will routinely say, I'll live into my 70s or my 80s. What people don't understand is that they are highly likely to live into their 90s, even to age 100 and beyond, which means that they're going to have accumulated an awful lot of money to provide for their very long retirement, much longer than they are anticipating. Good news is you're going to live a long time. Bad news is it's expensive. It takes a lot of cash to do that. So on the one hand, you're procrastinating, and on the other hand, you're underestimating how much you're going to need.
Ric, I just checked the life expectancy stats. For a male, it's 80 years, a female, 83 to 84. Has the trending longevity curve upended that classic 60-40 investment strategy for those planning retirement?
It really has. And in fact, the data you just cited, which is accurate, is also backward looking. When you look at all the actuarial data, I'm not sure which set of data you turn to, but whether you look at the IRS actuarial tables or the Social Security Administration's data or the Pew Research Foundation's data, Bureau of Labor Statistics, everybody says the same thing. If you're in your 60s, you've got a 20 or 25-year life expectancy. But what that is ignoring is the radical expansion of medical innovation and technology. In other words, if you're 60 years old today with a life expectancy to 85, guess what medical innovations are going to exist by the time you're 85? We are enjoying a radical expansion of knowledge unprecedented in human history. And as a result of this, you can widely anticipate that the diseases that are killing us today are likely going to be cured long before the time you ever get there, which means by the time you're in your 80s, life expectancy will then shift into 90s and 100s and beyond.
Ric, the headline in a recent Wall Street Journal article read, "The tried and true 60-40 portfolio and 4% withdrawal rate in retirement could lead to catastrophic outcomes if markets behave differently than in the past." Isn't the bottom line that the prospects for longevity should prompt us all to rethink everything, including our retirement investment strategy?
There are two primary issues, both of them related to the 60-40 portfolio. 60-40 is the routine mix that most advisors recommend most clients own. 60% of your money in stocks, 40% of your money in bonds. That 60-40 mix is time-tested, it's well-known, it works, and has worked for decades. But here's the problem. That 60-40 is too low for today's environment. Because of the incredible advances we're making in exponential technologies, which is the basis of my 12th book, Over My Shoulder, The Truth About Your Future, that book is all about artificial intelligence, robotics, AI, big data, 3D printing, nanotech, biotech, bioinformatics, financial technology, ed tech, ag tech. All of these technological innovations, in addition to crypto and the metaverse, are creating investment opportunities that are unprecedented. So on the one hand, a 60-40 mix is probably too conservative. 70-30 might be more appropriate. And second is something called the glide path. In other words, how long are you going to have a big allocation to stocks? Most people are in agreement that the younger you are, the more of your money you can have in stocks, because the younger you are, the longer you have, and the more you can tolerate risk. Makes a lot of sense. I don't think we would argue that a 20-year-old should have a 60-40 portfolio. They should probably have an 80-20 or a 90-10 because they've got so much time ahead of them. But thanks to today's longevity curve, even a 60-year-old can anticipate a 30 or 40-year lifeline, which means 60-40 is probably too conservative even for them. And more importantly, what's the glide path? When are you going to reduce the allocation from 70-30 to 60-40 to 50-50 to 40-60? We need to do a couple of major things. We need to increase the 60-40 to 70-30, maybe even 80-20, and then we need to own it longer than we would ordinarily have thought. Instead of reducing your stock market exposure in your 60s, you probably want to hold on to that well into your 80s. So we need to update our investment strategy to take into account the longevity that we're now experiencing for the first time ever.
What's your advice to those individuals that are changing their estate plans to irrevocable trust to avoid that anticipated tax exemption scheduled to go into effect in 2026?
Well, we're going to see a huge rash of changes in our tax code because we have an election coming up. And both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have signaled significant changes to tax law. So it's really hard to say right now what the outcome is going to be. We'll have to wait and see who wins the election, who controls the House and Senate. But no matter what the outcome, we can anticipate changes. There are two elements to this. One is the tax rate you pay today. The other is the tax rate you're going to pay in the future. And second is probate. When you finally do pass, how do we transfer our assets to our heirs? You either go through the probate process or you skip it with proper planning. The irrevocable trust idea that you mentioned is designed to avoid the probate process, which saves your heirs an awful lot of time and money and headache, but that doesn't necessarily lower taxes. So we have to engage in two different sets of strategies, one for tax and one for management. And we're going to have to wait and see on the tax side what happens with the new administration.
Support for BrainStorm by Us Against Alzheimer's comes from Biogen. Driven by our commitment to patients and our strong business foundation, Biogen remains dedicated to furthering Alzheimer's disease research and treatment, aiming to help address the unmet needs in this devastating condition, with an emphasis on early-stage disease.
Ric, you talk about protecting oneself in retirement. The fact is that 2/3 of those who get Alzheimer's are women, and we're also 2/3 the caregivers. Is your investment advice on protecting oneself the same for women as men?
It is. We do insert, I think, an extra level of urgency and imperativeness for women for the two reasons you cited. You're more likely to live a long time. You're more likely to outlive your husband rather than he outlive you. And you're more likely to suffer from Alzheimer's or other dementia. So it is a more imperative conversation for women. But nevertheless, we encourage all folks to pay attention to the likelihood that you're going to live a really long time. And the longer you live, the more likely you'll develop Alzheimer's or other dementia. The likelihood of getting it at age 60 is about 1 in 10, but by age 85, it's 1 in 3. So we do have to pay attention to this. So we look at today's leading causes of death: respiratory illness, heart disease, cancer, diabetes. These are all likely to be cured over the next couple of decades thanks to medical innovation. But what's not on that list of cure is Alzheimer's. Despite $30 or $40 billion spent on research over the past several decades and many, many therapies and drugs in the pipeline today, we still don't have effective therapeutics. We don't have a cure. We don't have a vaccine. We don't have effective treatments. And this means we need to recognize that in our 80s and 90s, it is very possible that we're going to have to deal with this. And that means we're going to need to have plenty of money and plenty of advanced planning to protect ourselves from this. And it's particularly acute for women, as you noted.
Ric, many in their prime are unwilling to step forward and be tested because they're afraid, and rightly so, that the stigma of the disease will marginalize them professionally and they'll be unable to protect themselves financially. What's your reaction to those concerns?
I'm one of those entrepreneurs that is building efforts to create a diagnostic tool, and we are hopeful to be bringing our effort into the marketplace by the end of this year or Q1 of next year. And you're right, people are asking a very valid question: why should I bother to get tested if there's nothing you can do about it? Well, fortunately, there now is a raft of research that shows you can do something about it. While we're waiting for that purple pill to swallow that will be the vaccine or cure of Alzheimer's, in the meantime, there are a variety of lifestyle changes that have been documented very, very successful at delaying symptoms or reducing symptoms. And you know what all those lifestyle issues are, because it's the same lifestyle issues for every other aspect of our health: diet, exercise, sleep, stress, and relationships. If we pay attention to those issues of our life, then we're going to be able to combat and thwart Alzheimer's in a way that we didn't realize we could 5 years ago. I think that you're right, Meryl, that people are reticent to know if they have this. They don't want the mental and emotional and psychological burden of knowing that this is in their future. But increasingly, people will discover that the sooner they know, the sooner they really can do something about it.
Why did you and your wife decide to own a research company focused on early diagnostics? What do you see in the future?
We've been in the Alzheimer's fight, as you have, Meryl, for decades. And the reason that Gene and I got involved in this fight is because of what we saw our clients experiencing. We were seeing an incredible frequency, not only of clients getting Alzheimer's, but parents of clients getting Alzheimer's. And in both cases, we saw the financial impact of that. Alzheimer's, that's not a word any of us grew up hearing. We heard cancer. We didn't hear Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a relatively recent phenomenon, reflected by the fact that living long ages is a relatively recent phenomenon. Alzheimer's doesn't strike people in their 20s and 30s the way cancer does. And so it's only because people are living so long that we're seeing more and more incidents of Alzheimer's. And at the same time, we're seeing that medical science has not yet delivered drugs that we need to fight this disease, which means we are left to lifestyle. And it all begins with diagnostics. Until you know you have an illness, you can't begin to treat it. So we recognize that if we're going to find our little place in the world of the Alzheimer's fight, where can we be most effective? It's in the creation of a diagnostic tool, because there are no diagnostic tools that are good enough yet, readily available yet, affordable yet. And this is the first step, we believe, toward enlightenment for the vast majority of people. We routinely get blood tests when we go get a medical checkup that screens for dozens of illnesses. Why are we not doing similar for Alzheimer's? So this is why we decided to focus our energies in that area.
Ric, the early ApoE4 blood-based biomarkers have shown impressive accuracy and will be far more accessible than expensive PET scans that are out of pocket unless you're in a study. What pressure do you see these innovative diagnostics putting on both private and government payment systems?
People are getting this diagnostic tool, and a certain percentage of them test positive as likely to develop this in the next 10 to 20 years. That's going to create a demand for more government funding to create treatments and cures and vaccines. So I think that this is really the key element for us getting to where we finally need it to be.
Ric, there is typically a 10 to 15-year cycle before physicians and providers get on board to offer tests and for Medicare to reimburse for these new technologies. Isn't it up to the public to advocate for and demand access?
If we don't, as you know, the economic cost of Alzheimer's is going to bankrupt the country. So we have no choice but to deal with this. And so far, it's getting too little attention.
Are investments in these new diagnostic technologies advised for the average investor?
When you say investments, do you mean for someone to invest in the hopes that they'll be able to profit from this advent? It's early stage. The companies that are exploring this space are startups. That's what I'd have to call mine. Gene and I have so far been self-funding the company, which has 4 PhDs working in this space with us. It's high risk, and we're not sure of the economic viability. I'm not terribly worried if it isn't the greatest investment in the world, because our primary purpose has been to use this as a fight against this dreadful disease. But we are anticipating that if the diagnostic tool we're building proves to be as effective as right now it looks like it will be, that it will perform very well in the marketplace. It'll generate an ROI for us, which will be nice to see considering the many, many years and many, many dollars we've been devoting to this. But that said, there aren't easy ways for people to invest in this space. That isn't a lot of money and a lot of time. The big drug companies tend to be working on the treatments, cures, and vaccines rather than the diagnostic tools. So I don't know that this is really a space for most folks to have access to at this stage.
A 2020 study published in JAMA Internal Medicine found that deteriorating financial capabilities are among the earliest signs of cognitive decline. People miss mortgage payments, fall behind on credit cards, or make impulsive purchases or put money in risky investments, even up to 5 years before diagnosis. What is the fiduciary responsibility and liability of both investment advisors and financial institutions around managing this issue?
Yeah, it is a huge concern. We've known for many, many years that our peak intellectual performance with finance is in our early 50s. And this is a challenge because most people who are managing their money in their 50s have been doing it for 20, 30 years, our whole adult lives. And they continue to do it into their 60s and 70s and 80s. And as their abilities decline, their attitude is, I'm fine, I've been doing this my whole life. Don't get in my way. And they may not even be aware of the fact that their abilities are declining, that their performance is weakening. To your point, they may be failing to balance their checkbook, failing to pay bills timely. They may be making bad investment decisions. They may be more likely to become victimized by scams and frauds. And so we all must be diligent. And there are, I would say, 3 major groups here who need to be paying attention. Number 1, your spouse and family. They need to be looking at you very frequently. Next time you visit mom or dad, are there bills laying around? Does the car have any dents in it? Take a look around the house and see if it seems to be maintained in an orderly fashion. If not, and it's unusual, that's a red flag. Second is your financial advisor. Your financial advisor probably has been with you for a number of years, knows you and your habits pretty well. If the advisor is paying attention, and they should be able to identify behavioral changes. You're not paying attention, you're not retaining information, you're forgetting to do things that you had promised to follow up on, you're making sudden new requests regarding your money, deposits or withdrawals, or changing your investments, making new purchases and sales of securities, all of which may seem to be out of the norm. The advisor should be aware of this, and if so, talking to a trusted contact that you have. You should be providing your advisor with the name of a trusted member of your family or a close friend or member of the clergy that you have a relationship with, who the advisor can reach out to help ensure that you are aware of this and that we're protecting you against yourself with bad financial mistakes. And the third is your physician. You likely have as long a relationship with your doctor, and they ought to be paying attention as well, because you cited it really well, Meryl, that while we're trying to identify the potential for us to be suffering from cognitive decline, it often does show up in routine, mundane, daily tasks. When you're out at a restaurant, you struggle calculating the tip. It's very simple things along those lines. And as you noted, these kinds of issues can surface years before you might otherwise suspect that you might be having issues.
Our guest has been leading financial advisor Ric Edelman. In part 2, we examine options around long-term care, and he shares forecasts from his 2 most recent books, The Truth About Artificial Intelligence and The Truth About Crypto.
I would recommend for people from their 20s to their 60s is The Truth About Crypto. Blockchain, Bitcoin, digital assets is one of the most revolutionary new technologies in the past quarter century. It is Internet 3.0. The Internet, of course, invented in the 1990s. We all wish we had invested in Internet stocks back then. We all missed it. Now we have an opportunity not to miss this one. Being a totally brand new asset class, most people are unfamiliar with it, don't understand how it works. It's a totally new conversation, just like computer technology was new back in the 90s.
That's it for this edition. I'm Meryl Comer. Thank you for brainstorming with us.
Support for BrainStorm by Us Against Alzheimer's comes from Eisai. Early Alzheimer's disease, sometimes called mild cognitive impairment or mild dementia due to Alzheimer's disease, is a progressive type of brain disease that causes problems with memory, language, and thinking. You cannot stop Alzheimer's disease from getting worse, but you can take steps to slow how fast it progresses. If you or someone you love is experiencing memory loss or problems with thinking, it's important to speak with a doctor about your concerns and available treatment options that may help. To learn more about a treatment option for mild cognitive impairment or mild dementia due to Alzheimer's disease, visit treatalzearly.com. That's treatalzearly.com. Subscribe to BrainStorm on your favorite podcast platform and join us on the first and third Tuesday of every month.